ha de ha he ya ha hu he ha he ya ha hu he.
With a traditional welcome, weavers from Canada and Alaska gathered in Ketchikan. They met to revive an old technique of weaving geometric patterns called raven's tail. Less than a dozen cloth robes and a few illustrations are all that remain of the early weavings.
He would be my great-great-grandfather. His name was Kaslian. And then in Tlingit, Kaslian means a strong man. He swore they're what they call the raven tail. That's what they said. We didn't know about it at all, our generation.
It's a raven's tail weaving, and this kind of weaving predated the Chilkat robes. The last known original weavings were done probably in about the late 1700s, and it's very geometric in design, as you can see. The people who wove these particular robes, they learned how to make the round designs, the circular designs, the designs that you now see on the Chilkat blankets. And then this weaving was lost.
Circular designs are what attracted Cheryl Samuel to Northwest Coast Weavings. Because she wanted to know how to weave a perfect circle, Samuel studied the Chilkat blanket. And that led to the rediscovery of raven's tail weaving.
You always wonder when you're looking at Chilkat, how did the women ever figure this out? It's so complex and so beautiful. And then I became aware of the earlier weavings, and there are only, in this whole world, there are only 15 of them. And out of the 15, only 11 of them are cloth. And out of the 11, only 6 of them are whole. So I went to visit all of them. I went to each of the countries where they are. Most of them are in Russia. There are 4 robes in Russia. They were there through trade or some other reason. I don't know exactly how they got to Russia, but because the Russians were on this coast very early, we just have to go to the robes themselves. This is what I had to do, and ask my questions. How do you make such a thing? And nobody will let you take it apart. Maybe 10 years ago, perhaps even less than 10 years ago, these robes, if they were known at all by anyone, they were called Northern Geometric Style robes. And only academic anthropologists knew about them, really. And that's what they called them. When I started working with them, it was very clear to me very quickly that I couldn't stand calling them a mathematical term. This had no heart or soul or anything in it. And so I went to the literature, the old manuscripts, and in 1906 Lieutenant Emmons wrote a manuscript called the Chilkat Blanket. And he gives a very brief history of the Chilkat robe, and in it he says that an earlier style of weaving that was done before Chilkat was a black and white robe with herringbone designs on it, and this was called in the Tlingit language Yehkuu, and that translates as the raven's tail, or tail feathers of the raven.
Samuel described the technique in her book, The Raven's Tail. And since the mid-1980s, she's been helping others learn the rudiments of raven's tail weaving.
Well, this is real similar to basketry because it's finger twining. It's a lot of people that came in were confused by our weaving because they were accustomed to seeing people weave on looms with shuttles. And we don't use looms or shuttles. These are more like frames, and the work just hangs from them. And you finger twine them just the way you would do a basket.
It's hard to do it, but it's very challenging, and I've gotten a lot of respect for Native women and the culture that produced this kind of weaving, because it's very ingenious, and it's baffling to me all the time, but it's very challenging also.
Weaving with other women is so much fun. And we get all kinds of ideas from one another, we inspire one another. Basically, I came here for inspiration. Not so much technique, although I have learned a lot, but inspiration, that's why.
They're all working on one robe, and everyone takes shifts. They take half-hour shifts where you'll have 3 to 4 weavers in teams working on the robe. While these 4 weavers are working on the robe, there are other weavers all around this Heritage Center who are working on individual raven's tail projects, and they're working on leggings and pouches and collars and robes and all sorts of different things, but they're all raven's tail weaving, and they're all different. It's this amazing geometric style. It just touches something inside people, and it just draws you to the weaving.
Each one of those forms has a meaning. Each one of those patterns comes from something, and that thing comes from an experience in the people's lives. And so they're telling stories too. They're just not telling them as instantly, recognizably as a curvilinear figure might.
A community robe was started at the conference and will travel to the weavers' hometowns to be completed. Designs were chosen to tell of those who gathered to weave it and of the revival of this old art form.
And that would be a fun one to do. It's this one. They're usually together, these two, tattoo and this one. And in Juneau, they say this is the witch doctor design, but in Haines, Jenny Clonat told me that it was the different seasons on the mountain. Winter and summer are real close, because what they say happens on the mountains are the sun shines down, and all the plants are growing under it. It's not like down below. And all of a sudden the snow melts, and those plants are already there, like magic, because they didn't spring up like they do on the lower elevations. They're growing under that snow as the snow melts. They're so excited they're coming up. And so that's why in Haines they say that this represents the different seasons on the mountain, because the snow hides the spring, and all of a sudden they're there. The plants are all there. So that's kind of neat, because that's how we are. We're just springing. We were hidden for 200 years, and all of a sudden we're springing.
And those of us from Sitka got together and said, well, what would you like to have in the robe representing Sitka? And we all thought of water and mountains, and eventually we ended up with a basketry design called Tide or Waves.
Audrey and I are the only ones that came from Juneau, and we wanted to include the women that have been weaving with us that weren't able to come. So we selected Yaith Kuwu, which is the tail of the raven, and that's the design we're using because we missed them, and when we go back we're going to be weaving together, and they're mostly raven ladies from the Snail House in Juneau.
One of the things that Esther Littlefield has been saying to us almost daily is that we all are sisters together. We're all working together, and that's the way our world has to be now. Each of us can tell our own stories with this weaving. Each one of us, regardless of the color of our hands. It's available for all of us, and we seem to be welcome. It's very nice.
And this design here of people holding hands became the basis for this pattern. If you had hands like this all the way around in a circle, you had a line that goes like that and then down, and then up, down, down, like that. So I took that line, worked with it, and then thought that we're not only here representing ourselves, we're representing all the people that came before us, and all the things, all these lines and hands holding up above are the future weavers, the generations of weavers that will follow us. This is a pattern which has been designed over the week, which shows you what the robe will look like when it's finished. Different communities have put in the kind of design that they want. These are the more experienced communities. And then the link, those that are beginners, will tie us all together with what Dolores calls the Haida spider web. So it's pretty exciting. And I think this is a wonderful, wonderful beginning to an amazing art form.